Got all the metal work done. Now it's time to start body work. I've got the gaskets drying here, the rubber trunk seal, before I start on the back side of the car. So I'm gonna give that a day or so to dry up, and then it goes back on my alignment holes. All my jams are done. Everything is gapped appropriately, starting with some white guide coat powder on the roof, and then I will get the car up to a nice comfortable working level and start sanding on the rest of the body. So hood, once everything was shrunk, it tightened up, but it obviously left a little bit of filler work. Just a skim coat should clean it up. It's got all the perfect radius on it. So obviously epoxy primered all my bare spots, welded up the antenna hole, put in the holes for the splash guards or the rock guards, whatever they're called. Made sure those are adjusted and in a good spot before they go out to the chrome plater. But other than that, yeah, now I've got the garage cleaned up, mostly a lot of the small stuff masked off, and try to keep all the sanding dust in one central area here in the middle bay. But as anybody who's ever done body work before knows, it makes a mess everywhere. So it'll end up everywhere, but it cleans, so I'm not too worried about it. I've got the first rough sand of the roof here done. It felt pretty good and looked pretty good, but obviously you can see there's a couple high spots, a bunch of little small low spots in various places. So what I did was I shot the entire car with a Southern polyurethane epoxy gray, and then my second and third coat was black. And the idea behind that was that as I break through the black, I know to stop before I hit metal. I don't have a whole lot of material here to sand, which I knew going in. So basically what I'm doing is finding my lows, marking my lows, and instead of spot treating all the small spots, what I'm gonna do is skim the entire roof, and that'll allow me to come in and feather the whole thing in and hit all the spots. Because what happens if I do a small section here, what I end up doing is around the outside, I just keep going a little too much, and I'll actually break through the epoxy into the metal, which I want to avoid. So I'm gonna try here to hit all the body work and then get it exactly where it needs to be on all the panels, and then hit it with some high build Southern polyurethane primer. And then that should, if I do it right, that should be my one and only final primer layer. I may have to spot a couple of sections depending on where and how I go. But when you see stuff on TV shows and you see them cover the entire surface of the car, and everybody who's hasn't done body work cringes. It's actually a lot easier to do that and sand almost all of it off than it is to spot little small sections and end up chasing them. So just a FYI. And also the long linear and big kid blocks are amazing to work with. It allows you to get long sections perfectly smooth and straight. So it's getting there. Now just time and make a mess. Filler, I'm using Rage Extra and Rage Ultra, mixed 50-50. The Extra helps with the working time, so I can do larger sections thinner, and it doesn't set up on me as fast. But I've got 4 mixed batches, spread evenly, thin layer all over the roof. And looks crazy, it looks ugly, but most of it's going to end up on the floor as dust. So there's just going to be a very little bit left on the low spots when I'm all done with it. So with a little bit of luck, this will be my only coat, but we're going to see how that goes. All right, we got the roof knocked out. So it's hit with one full skim coat, and then hit it with 80, knocked it down, use the mica as a guide coat, and then a couple of small low spots, hit those, feather those out, and then I hit the whole thing again with 80. Longboarded the whole thing with the linear blocks and the big kid blocks over here. So now it's in pretty good shape. I'm going to do the other panels, and then I'll come back here and I'll guide coat this whole thing. I've got just enough material left on it where I can hit it with the 80 and then hit it, or actually I'll probably start at 150 and then go down to 220. So it's prepped and ready for primer. But all in all, it looks ugly, but it is laser smooth. Next up is the trunk. You can see all the dark spots is where it's low, and obviously the weld and grain spots. But this is a little tricky because you've got to match the panels. So these need to flow into each other perfectly. So this obviously with the seams, it gets filler, and there's actually, this whole thing comes up just probably a 1/16 of an inch to match the lip here, and then it all gets feathered and sanded in. So shop is a mess, but that's Bodywork. Well, we are well into Bodywork. Hood is, sorry, the roof is what I started with. Was able to skim coat the whole thing. It was actually pretty good. I knocked everything down to 80 grit. I just finished up the deck lid and the top of the rear quarters. Huge pain. There's a lot of welding marks and other issues in the deck lid. So that's all in a good spot. Everything's knocked down to 80. I'm going to do a guide coat on the whole car and 220 before I seal it and prime it. But I just took the long block and hit the quarter in the door. And these are basically what looks like visually perfect panels. You can see that, in fact, they're not. This is actually why you skim coat. Makes it a lot easier. I could also, and a lot of people do this, just build up layers of primer. Either way, both techniques work. Hood and a couple other spots. I put some fiberglass reinforcement filler, short strand filler. It's a lot harder. So on the areas where I could potentially have some flex, I wanted a good base. This was something I hammered up, but it was still a little bit low. So I've got a little bit of filler there. And then on the other side over here, I've got a seam, and I just roughed that seam in, and then I'll skim coat the whole thing. But it's progressing. Everything's a mess, obviously, but it all gets cleaned up. Probably halfway there. I'm coming up on about 40 hours. Got the sides pretty close to being knocked out. You notice the door seams here, I mudded them in. One thing that I don't like on these is they roll in here on both sides and then on the fender. And when you look at it, and you look down the side of the car, you see basically a bubble effect. And I've never liked that. So a lot of the high-end show cars will do this where they'll just lock the whole thing in and then sand it straight and then come in and cut and then reshape the jambs back to the metal. So I'm gonna try this the first time, see how it goes. Deck lid It's all knocked out. Quarters are in pretty good shape. Again, doing the same thing over here. I still have to longboard this whole thing in, get it where it needs to be. The quarters are pretty close. I just need to hit a couple low areas, do another long 3-foot board or 32-inch board, and then we should be onto the front of the car. I figure maybe 80 hours or so to get to the first sealer and primer on this thing. So interestingly, I'm actually keeping track of my hours on the Bodywork, so I'm curious to see how long this really takes. But about halfway there for the coat of body filler. And then sealer, high build 2K primer, block it down to probably 220, and then I will go and blow the whole thing apart. Do the insides, the jambs, put it on the rotisserie, do the bottom of the body, and then each individual panel I'll wet sand it out to 600, and then prep the final paint. Got about 2/3 of the bodywork knocked out. Light skim coat on everything. Noticed I sealed the doors in order to make sure that the transitions between the panels are perfect. They naturally have a little bit of a bubble to them, and I never really liked that. So this is one of the common things a lot of the high-end show cars end up doing. This panel here was pretty good, so it only needed a little bit. And then I'm just about done on this side as well. A couple of little spots, but we're getting close. And then the next is hood, which is going to be a little bit of a pain in the neck. And then everything gets cleaned up, and then it goes in the booth and hit with a epoxy sealer, and then 3 coats of high build 2K primer. So I got the body work knocked out, and now I'm ready for primer. I'm going to shoot 3 coats of 2K high build primer, Southern polyurethanes. I open up my doors. I used a 1/8 inch drill bit on the side, just slowly using the side of the drill bit to grind out and follow the channels, and then sanded them out. Made sure I've got my 3/8 gaps everywhere. So I cleaned up the garage, rolled the car out, cleaned the car off, blew it off. So it's getting pretty close. I've got to now clean the car, back tape, get the paint booth blown up, and then mix up some primer and start priming. I think this fender I'm going to shoot a coat of epoxy to seal these. I got too many burnt through spots on the bare metal, so I don't want to have that potentially rust on me. So I'll shoot just this one fender here, maybe a couple of the little spots where I burned through, just so it's completely sealed. But it's ready. And once the primer's down, then I'll longboard block sand this thing, 220 and then 320, and then I'll stop and blow it all apart and do the jambs, the insides, dash, all the other stuff that needs to be prepped. Put the body on the rotisserie, do the bottom of the body, and then I'll shoot all that with primer. And then the final wet sand will be at 600 off the car. All the panels will be sitting on the benches or the sawhorses. And then it's final paint. So I think I'm into this about 60 hours so far. I've been keeping track of my time. Just coming up on 60 hours now. So not too bad, lots of work. Looks ugly, but it'll look laser straight when I'm done with it. Primer's done. Got 4 coats of high build Southern polyurethane 2K primer on it. Booth worked out well. Got a little bit of dust. It's just from moving it in and out, cleaning the booth. But worked out pretty well. Now next is block sanding, guide coat, and block it all out. And then wet sand, and then blow it apart. Do all the jams. Put the body on the rotisserie and spot prime as needed and get it ready for final paint. I got the body all blocked out. Just pulled the hood and the deck lid off. Got the jams all cleaned up as well. A couple of small spots, so I ended up using the dolphin glaze on the 2K primer because you can't use the regular Rage. So, progress. Now I've got to do the underside of the hood, underside of the deck lid here, pull the doors off, do the inside of the door jams, firewall, front splash pan, all that other stuff. You can see how bad this is. So I'm going to skim coat all this and clean it up. Once the panels are all blown apart and ready for the next round of primer, then I'll put the body on the rotisserie, do the bottom side of the body, and then get that ready, and I'll do the firewall and the bottom of the body in the epoxy, and then everything else will get coated 2K polyurethane. And then final wet sand all apart and prep for color. So it's lots and lots and lots of work. But it's getting there. All the body panels have been block sanded to 220 with guide coat. So they're ready for their final prime. And we've got the body on the rotisserie. All the jams have been knocked out, firewall. And everything is ready for the final prime. Next up is the bottom. Going to clean up a couple of spots, sand it, get it ready to be primed. And then final coat of primer, wet sand, and then ready for color. For the first coat of single stage black, and do the bottom, the firewall, the dash, a few other small loose parts. Got everything taped off. Bottom of the hood. We're gonna do a few other parts and see how it goes. We're shooting a epoxy as a sealer, reduced, and then the SPI single stage over here. So with a little luck, we'll see how this lays out.